President Biden has offered his pullback into Ukraine, saying any incursion by Russian forces massed on its border would constitute an unacceptable invasion. He says there would be a severe and coordinated economic response from the West, and that retaliation has been laid down very clearly for President Putin. The comments come on the eve of first talks in Geneva between the US and Russia to try to reduce tensions. Meanwhile, the first members of a 30-strong British battalion team has arrived in Ukraine to help train local forces in the use of anti-tank weapons. Boris Johnson says any Russian incursion would be a disaster for both countries and the world. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landau has the latest from Geneva. It's not just the Russians who are conducting military exercises. There are pictures released by Ukraine's defense ministry showing their forces training close to the crime. That was extended by Russia in 2014 and the kind of incursion that Ukraine and its allies are trying to deter once again. I've been absolutely clear with the President Putin. He has no misunderstanding if any example Russian units move across Ukraine border that is on invasions, but it will be met with severe and coordinated economic response. In some of the most intensive American diplomacy for years, the U.S. Secretary of State has been touring Western capitals. He was in Berlin today, relying support for Ukraine and appealing directly to the people of Russia. You deserve to live with security and dignity, but what really risks your security is a pointless war with your neighbors in Ukraine. Western allies are threatening Russia with massive economic sanctions if there's any invasions behind the scenes. There are differences over what those penalties should be put to public message is united. We are in absolutely close coordination with regard to touring sections because we have an absolutely thorough assessment of the situation, but also of the reactions with regard to the security of Ukraine. This also applies to sections. Fresh cyclized images appear to show how Russia has massed not just troops near Ukraine, but also military equipment from Kilomovo to the north to Salaty on Ukraine's eastern border, and Novonoye to the south near Crimea. The diplomacy now moves to Geneva, where Mr. Pliken arrived for talks with his Russian counterpart on Friday. But the discussions at this hotel tomorrow may be difficult because the gap between both sides is a lot. The Americans want to talk about avoiding war in Ukraine, but the Russians want to talk about their demands for NATO to step back and allow Moscow to establish a new sphere of influence across Eastern Europe. In eastern Ukraine, they know what might mean pressure. Separatists have been fighting government forces here since 2014, and the scars are all to see. Andrea Yeser is 74 years old and lives close to the front line. It's a miracle we stay alive, she says. We could have died many times. She's pro-Russian and fears a full-scale war. Russia denies that it is intention, but its forces are training hard close to Ukraine. The question now is whether all these exercises might soon become the real thing. Jam, What hope breaking in tomorrow's talk between the US and Russia where you are? Well, Clyde, I don't there's any great hope of some breakthrough tomorrow. The gap between both sides remain large. No real proposals have been flagged up in advance, and there seems little movement on the fundamentals. But there are some positive notes out there. Just I think the simple fact that the Western Alliance is just about managing to maintain this united front and the threat of sanctions to try to deter Russia's action. That is being held together by an awful lot of diplomacy on all sides. Boris Johnson spoke to his German counterpart this evening that separated forces, a small group, were arriving in Ukraine to help train with some new anti-tank missiles that the UK has delivered, and that said there's also this point, the fact that these talks are taking place tomorrow has raised some eyebrows, has been seen by some as a good sign. They've been through together last minute they are only three a couple of days ago. Last week, many people were saying the diplomatic route is over. Well, not quite, and I think the hope is that tomorrow we know Anthony Blinken and his Russia's counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, haven't met for some time, but seen well before Christmas. They got a lot to talk about, and the hope is that while the talking continues, at least the prospect is the hope is that maybe the fighting is a little bit more distant. Okay, James, thank you, James. They're live in Geneva.